that Met game, you want to talk about one that was not, and I know the Mets win. They hit 7 home runs, 15-11 final, but, 4 hours and 45 minutes on a Monday night out in Cincinnati as Gary Cohn's taking down the chili, in Cincinnati during the Mets broadcast on SNY last night. It was just a long baseball game. With that game starting shortly after 7 and ending right around midnight last night, Maggie, it was a long game. And, I think the big takeaway you take, number one is the resiliency of the Mets. After, Diaz blows the game in Pittsburgh, bounced back with that huge win against the Pirates to salvage the humiliation of getting swept by Pittsburgh. And then, down early last night in Cincinnati and to be able to rally back and win that game in extra innings, 15-11, hitting 7 home runs. Conforto's hot streak continues. Pilar with the big 3-run bomb. Conforto then followed up as they went back-to-back there. You love to see that. McCann with the big pinch hit home run as well to tie, the 2-run blast there. There's the resiliency of this team makes them a very likable group. They are flawed, and we talked about no DeGrom, obviously. That hurts. We'll see if he comes back off the IL. They do have, and, maybe I got to eat or walk back some of the conversation yesterday about Edwin Diaz because, I still give him credit for rebounding, but Diaz has got to figure something out here because it's now his third blown save, third or fourth blown save of the year. Last night he had an opportunity in Cincinnati. He walks the first base run, first at bat that he sees in order to try and hold on to that lead. He was, once again, confidence-wise, he's talking about missing Francisco Lindor. The Mets might have an issue here with Edwin Diaz being the closer for this team. They might need to address that spot or go to somebody else in that bullpen until Edwin Diaz does figure it out because when he goes sour, he goes really, really sour. And right now, his last 3 appearances have been really bad. Last night wasn't as bad as the 2 Pittsburgh appearances. I get that. But last night wasn't good. You needed Diaz to bounce back in a big-time way, and he didn't. And if you're a Diaz detractor or don't have confidence in Edwin Diaz, well, he continues to add fuel to the fodder because he continues to pitch poorly when given an opportunity to be. You can only say, I'm going to flush it for so long. It comes down to execution and being able to finish the job. And Edwin Diaz right now is not finishing the job. And the Mets offense, fortunately for the Mets last night, picked him up.
I'll take it one step further. Edwin Diaz cannot close games for this team until further notice, period. That is it. We said this about Aroldis Chapman after he lost it for a month. They had to move him out of the closer spot. That has to happen right now. And the thing is I don't really care about Edwin Diaz's feelings. I don't really care if this demotion, at least temporarily, if that, makes him have to do some soul searching. He's been demoted before, and he actually responded very well to it early in 2020. This is something that has to happen for this team. Edwin Diaz cannot be trusted right now. And he is not a lost cause by any stretch. I still think that Edwin Diaz can contribute to this team and he can find it. But right now, his fastball command is totally off. Not shockingly, like a lot of guys in sports, his spin rate is down since mid-June. And since mid-June, his ERA is over 8. Edwin Diaz has 3 consecutive outings, 2 blowing leads. Last night blows the save. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. And to have him out of the closer's role while he can start to figure it out is something that the Mets have to do right now. You can't just let this go on and he's going to figure it out or, let him make mistakes in that closer's role. Their lead in the NL East is down to 2 games. There is no margin for error. The Mets keep pulling these out of their behinds. I don't know how they're pulling out these wins. Partly, I think, because they're facing teams that aren't great, but Cincinnati is good. They're a talented team. They pulled that win out of God knows where last night after nearly 5 hours, and you cannot allow Edwin Diaz to close games for this team until further notice. Have to move him out of that highest leverage situation. I can't be worried about his confidence because he's been able to handle this before. Mets got to do it.
Yeah, and you might be right. It's not what, Joust was saying after the game last night when he was asked about Edwin Diaz and talking about him being, paraphrasing here, an elite-level dominant closer.
When he's right.
The Mets organization might be viewing it a little bit differently. But, yeah, results are results. He's been bad and has gone sour here for quite some time. And the offense, the positive thing is that you've seen an uptick here with the offense. That's that Conforto getting hot. Mm-hmm. Something I mentioned yesterday. It'd be a good time for Michael Conforto to go on one of his kind of Conforto 4 or 5 week tears where he looks like one of the best left-handed hitters in all of Major League Baseball. Well, you know what? Conforto's starting to get hot. That's going to be a good thing for this Met team here moving forward. You hope so. Jeff McNeil, you throw in there's too much talent in this lineup to be as bad as they have been offensively. So, you know, the pitching picked up the hitting for a large portion of this season. Now it's about time for the hitting to pick up the pitching. I'll disagree with you about Diaz. I just don't know exactly how you use Edwin Diaz and what role he would fill in that bullpen, because I think if you went with him in the 7th inning or went with him in the 8th inning, this is not a case of a guy mentally can't handle the closer's job. This is a case of he doesn't have the fastball command, so how exactly is he going to find it? Fair that they've demoted him in the past. Could you demote him again? Is it something that you could address? Maybe Craig Kimbrell at the MLB trade deadline for the Chicago Cubs. He's another guy that I think probably Sandy Alderson and company could kick the tires on. And once you acquire, say, a Craig Kimbrell, well, then Edwin Diaz's closer's days with the Mets, at least in the short term, are over.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing is about Kimbrell, at least, you know, he does have the track record of doing it for the Red Sox in the year they won the World Series. Now, like, no closer is perfect here, and I'm not going to say that Craig Kimbrell is never going to blow a big save for you or blow a big game, but maybe you do. If you are going to go for it, and this is going to be the year, then maybe you want more of a sure thing in the back of that bullpen, because that's my biggest fear about Edwin Diaz. You know, you can blow a few saves here and there. You can, you know, take a demotion to work on your fastball command or figure out how to pitch without sticky stuff, even though he says that he's not pitching with anything. And he's been asked that question 5 different times, 50 different ways. And he said he doesn't need anything. But, you know, the idea that you would just need a moment to try to figure out, you know, with this big midseason change, who you are as a pitcher and how you're going to, you know, locate your fastball. Like, that's fine to me. I worry about him in the postseason. Guys never pitched in the postseason before. And if it really is that big of a deal to have Francisco Lindor behind you, pumping you up, and I get it, both from Puerto Rico, I think that, you know, that's not a bad thing to have teammates who have your back. But if that really was something that was tipping the scales towards him, like having more confidence or not, well, you can't rely on someone outside of yourself.
No, it's nonsense.
Well, it's just not a sure thing. You know, who knows? Francisco Lindor could pull a hamstring when he comes back. Who knows?
Well, but you can't be relying on another player leading, you know, to you pitching well on the mound. It just, to me,
no, I mean, I think he's a mentor.
Kind of crutch. You just can't have that kind of crutch. Yeah, you can't have that crutch. You really can't. Right. You know, as a major league pitcher, I mean, and Edwin Diaz, I probably believe him that he wasn't, you know, using the sticky substance, because you know what, he's been terrible here for the Mets for the majority of his time.
Well, the spin
here
rate's
in New
down.
York, right? I get it, but he even before that, I mean, he was awful. I mean, he had a one good second half in a condensed 60-game season. Outside of that, Edwin Diaz has not been particularly good up until the first half this season, right, where he was good, and now he's taken a little bit of downturn, as you referenced the stats here, till June. So it's something that, you know, this team needs to overcome, because there is not that history of success where Diaz has been dominant for 6 or 7 years or 5 years or 4 years, whatever it might be, put whatever time frame you like, and you have say, well, I can lean on that. No, you haven't had that here. So that's where the trepidation for not only the organization, but more so a case of when we go to the calls and we take the Met fan calling in, there's little to no confidence in Edwin Diaz, whether it be in a big spot in the regular season or whether it be a big spot in the postseason, of being able to be the guy, even though he got off to a good start this year and had a good second half last year. So I get that. I understand, because when you watch him give up the grand slam in Pittsburgh and you watch him give up the lead last night in Cincinnati, you say, oh, here we go again. You can't lose this year or allow Edwin Diaz to sink this season. And that's something the Mets cannot allow to have happen. It's one thing to be beset by injuries, lose a guy like Jacob deGrom for the year. You cannot. If Edwin Diaz really goes sour here, Maggie, you cannot ride or die with Edwin Diaz and allow him continue to fail in big-time situations and not go to another option. And even if you don't get Craig Kimbrell, you have other options internally. I mean, you could go to a Seth Lugo. You could go to a Brad May.
Trevor May.
Trevor May. Yeah. You could go. There are other options internally where this team can go, even if they don't address the closer's role at the MLB trade deadline.
Well, and that's my thing, right? I would rather have, you know, Trevor May ends up coming in to clean up that game at the very end in the 11th inning after Banda got taken out. And it's like, well, was Trevor May like available this whole time? I know he pitched 3 days in a row. Maybe you're trying to avoid him, but really you're going to go to a guy in Banda who like met Dave Joust on the mound. They were joking about on the broadcast last night on the TV broadcast. But this is like where Steve Cohen's tweet last night, I start looking into this a little more, and, maybe it's my fault, because he's just sort of having fun with the fan base. But he said, let's play GM again. Make a trade now and pay a big price, or wait until closer to the deadline and pay a reasonable price. Now, he's right if we're talking about position players. If we're talking about Chris Bryant or Diaz or Story, like maybe as you get closer to the deadline for position players, because there's a lot of them that are potentially available, maybe you're getting a more reasonable price. If you're talking about pitchers, in my opinion, the price is only going up the closer you get to the deadline, isn't it? Because teams always need pitching, and contending teams always need pitching, whether you're talking about guys out of the bullpen, whether you're talking about starters. I mean, those are the premium guys whose price only goes up and up and up. So, like, I feel like the fan base is feeling an urgency, or I'll just say, talk for myself. I'm feeling an urgency to add to this pitching staff right now that it doesn't seem like the Mets are feeling. And I don't know how that is.
Yeah, well, but just because you want to acquire a pitcher right now doesn't mean the other team is willing to trade that pitcher right now, and they're going to be willing to wait and see if they can go out and get the best package possible.
Right, but that logic's flawed about the price going down as you get closer to the deadline if we're talking about pitchers. I think the price goes up as you get closer to the deadline. No,
I think it really depends on the pitcher. I really do, and how hot the market is for that pitcher, how many teams are involved. I don't think you can look at it logically one way or the other. I don't think I could throw a blanket statement out there and say, well, starting pitching, the market will go down as we go closer to the deadline. I don't really think that's necessarily true if you're looking at an elite level starter.
No, it only goes up.
If you're looking at Berrios, I mean, depending on how many teams are involved, you throw in the contract situation. I mean, there are a number of different factors when it comes down to the MLB trade deadline about what you can get back and just how many teams can be involved on a pitcher. But I'll tell you the other thing last night is that the Mets, and the Mets have got to do Diaz some favors here. I mean, the idea in the ninth inning of pitching to Winker for the Cincinnati Reds with Freeman up on deck with an open base at first base and Aquino sitting there on second made little to no sense. Freeman's hitting .213. Diaz ends up striking out Freeman, I think on 4 or 5 pitches. You are going out there, and I understand Joust was asked about it after the game. That is a mental mind. You cannot in any way. You want to talk about dumb baseball?
Yep.
That is dumb baseball. You cannot. Edwin Diaz is out there. You've got 2 outs. You finally got the man on second base in Aquino. You have a guy that's hitting .213 open base, and you're going out there and pitching a Winker. That made no sense to me whatsoever. And it came back and hurt the Mets because Winker comes through with the hit. Aquino scores from second base, ties the game up, and then Diaz ends up striking out. Freeman to end the inning. Into the top half of the 10th inning we go. You walk Winker there. I think Diaz has got a better than good chance of striking out Freeman there and getting out of that inning and preserving the 9-8 lead at that stage and holding on to the lead and getting the win when we don't have to go to the extra innings.
Well, as good as a move as it was from Dave Joust to pinch hit James McCann, and he comes up with a big 2-run home run, was as silly as it was to pitch to Winker there. Now, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, because the Reds returned the favor in the top of the 11th when they pitched to Jeff McNeil as opposed to walking the bases loaded for Banda, and then, figuring out what you do with Pilar, hoping you get a double play ball or something like that. I mean, and they return the favor. McNeil singles, and you get Peraza scores, and they take the 11-10 lead, and then 2 batters later, Pilar hits the 3-run home run, and it was good night. So they return the favor with a dumb move on that one also. Not as maybe dumb as what the Mets did, but the Mets end up getting the last laugh.
You can't pitch a Winker. I mean, you just cannot.
It's one of the best hitters on the team.
Well, and not just that. I mean, you got set Diaz up there for success. Man on first and second, you want to go for the guy that that you have a better than good chance of getting the swing and miss and the strikeout, and that is Freeman hitting .213 on the year for the Cincinnati Reds, and you go out there, let's go out there and attack Winker, and he ends up ripping a double. between, right up into the left center field gap, ends up on second base. Aquino scores, ties the game up. It made little to no sense. That's bad baseball.
But that's the same thing I said about the Yankees with Aroldis Chapman going back to the Royals.
Issue I have there is Chapman's a much better closer, significantly better closer than Edwin Diaz.
Not right now. He's got a better history.
I understand he's got a better history.
But right now, they both can't hit the ocean from the beach.
I trust Chapman more than I do trust. And here's the other thing. Chapman, when Aaron Boone goes out to the mound and has the conversation with Aroldis Chapman, and they make the decision that they're going to pitch to Carlos Santana, and then Boone changes his mind as he goes into the dugout, that was the mistake that led Boone to apologizing to Aroldis Chapman the very next day.
I know, but that's why I thought the logic wasn't flawed from Boone the first time, just to walk Santana to face a guy who's never had a major league hit. It's kind of the same thing like last night when you have a clearly, one hitter who's clearly way more dangerous. Again, not Ted Williams, but clearly more dangerous than the guy behind him.
More trust in Chapman than Diaz, though.
I don't know. I mean, they're both struggling. Chapman's struggling huge and was
right
up to that point.
I understand, but you got more. Chapman's been a historically better closer.
He's a 7-time All-Star, I know, but
I mean, there's not even a comparison.
But you're trying to win a
two.
baseball game.
Listen, bad baseball decision last night. Dave Joust. Now the Mets bailed him out. The offense came hitting. They hit 7 home runs. They win the game 15-11. Want to hear from you. Diaz, closer role. In or out right now? Do you want him out of that spot?